Welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Today, we are going to discuss the important issues appearing in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 2nd May 2019. The news to be discussed has been presented on the screen, and timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. Let's start our today's discussion. Now, this news appears on page number 1 and also as a continuation on page number 10. It says United Nations Security Council designates Masood Azhar as a global terrorist. However, reasons for this decision did not mention the Pulwama attack. Now, on page number 10, the news says as per China, it lifted its hold based on revised request. So, basically, China had earlier placed a hold on designating Masood Azhar as a global terrorist in the United Nations Security Council. However, China has now lifted its hold and now Masood Azhar has been designated as a global terrorist by the UNSC. And this particular news says that this decision of UNSC is in line with India's position. In your prelims examination, this topic gets covered under current events of national and international importance. And in your mains, it gets covered under GS paper 2, specifically with respect to India and its neighborhood relations. Now, first of all, let's go through this entire topic, then we'll come back to this particular practice question based on this particular news. Now, as already mentioned, Jaish-e-Mohammed chief Masood Azhar has been listed as a designated terrorist by the United Nations Security Council. And this is a major diplomatic achievement for India, despite the fact that Pulwama terror attack was not mentioned in one of the reasons given by United Nations Security Council with respect to designating Masood Azhar as a global terrorist. So this decision of the United Nations Security Council imposes travel ban, arms embargo, as well as freezing of financial assets of Masood Azhar and his organization, that is Jaish-e-Mohammed. Now, India has welcomed this decision of the United Nations Security Council and has called it a step in the right direction, as it demonstrates international community's resolve to fight against terror as well as against its enablers, those support terror and terrorist organizations. As per the officials of Ministry of External Affairs, listing of Masood Azhar as a designated terrorist is in accordance with India's position and in line with information that India has already shared with the members of Sanctions Committee regarding terrorist activities of Masood Azhar as well as his organization Jaish-e-Mohammed. Now, the government of India also mentioned that it will continue its efforts through international forum and organizations to ensure that these terrorist organizations, including their leaders who cause harm to Indian citizens, are brought to justice. So, this was the stance taken by the government of India with respect to listing of Masood Azhar as a designated terrorist by the UNSC. Now, the reasons provided by the UNSC with respect to listing of Masood Azhar as designated terrorist are its organization, that is Jaish-e-Mohammed's association with Al-Qaeda, recruitment, participation in financing, planning, facilitating, preparing with respect to acts, activities of supplying or selling or transferring of arms and related material, and also with respect to recruiting of fighters in Afghanistan. However, this reason do not mention anything with respect to Pulwama terror attack. Now, one of the main reasons why UNSC was able to designate Masood Azhar as a global terrorist was because of China lifted its hold which it had placed earlier on Masood Azhar, and that was with respect to China's good ties with Pakistan. China reversed its earliest decision based on revised materials which it received from the UNSC, as it substantiated Masood Azhar's involvement in terrorist activities. And it was because of these revised materials provided to China, because of which it agreed to list Pakistan-based Jaish-e-Mohammed as a global terrorist. Now, China had opposed the listing of Masood Azhar in 2009 post the Mumbai terror attacks, when India brought the proposal to list Masood Azhar as designated global terrorist before the United Nations Security Council. Further, China also opposed India's stance on designating Masood Azhar as a global terrorist in 2016 post Pathankot terror attack, in 2017 post Uri terror attack, and even after the Pulwama attack in 2019, China had placed designation of Masood Azhar as a global terrorist on hold. Now, after Pulwama attack, a group of three permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, the United States, the United Kingdom, as well as France, co-sponsored the listing request for designating Masood Azhar as a global terrorist at the Sanctions Committee on 27th February 2019. However, even after the attack, China had placed a hold on the request on 13th March 2019, and this hold normally lasts for 3 months. Now, after China put a hold on the request, the United States circulated a draft resolution with respect to sanctioning of Masood Azhar outside the committee, that is, outside the 1267 committee among the rest of the United Nations Security Council members. And this was presumably done to pressure China into either supporting the listing or to take a stand in open proceedings and risk being seen as terror supporting nation. So the real question now is, what made China to turn around with respect to listing of Masood Azhar with respect to its previous stance? As we can see that China had earlier opposed this stance in 2009, in 2016, 17 as well as in 2019. So as per the experts, this turnaround of China can be attributed to the following grounds or following reasons. The first point provided is with respect to improvement in ties between India and China. It says that post Wuhan summit, when the Prime Minister Narendra Modi met with President Xi Jinping, it signaled a better and improving relation between the two countries despite issues with respect to BRI, that is, despite issues of Belt and Road Initiative. Now, both these countries are less concerned about convincing or pressuring the other side to change its tune with respect to BRI as well as CPEC, that is China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, and instead are now focusing to find avenues of cooperation either through Chinese projects in India or through cooperation in third countries by both India and China. So after the thaw with respect to BRI, both India and China are trying to move ahead in a pragmatic way. Further, it says that even India seems to have toned down its rhetoric on Belt and Road Initiative, which has been received well by China. As even though India did not participate in the BRI forum of 2017, however, both these countries are now working on to hold an informal summit very soon in 2019. Now, another reason with respect to China's turnaround can be attributed to a severe threat from the three countries, that is the US, UK and France, where they had asked China to clear its stand on Masood Azhar, or it threatened with the possibility of a public open vote at the United Nations Security Council if it did not accede to the demand of listing Masood Azhar. So because of the pressure from these countries and the possibility with respect to open vote on its stance may have reversed China's decision. Now another point to be understood is that few times back Pakistan had claimed that Masood Azhar was unreasonably unwell. This meant that Masood Azhar had outlived his usefulness to Pakistani establishment, which had earlier protected him so far. And this eventually led China to ensure that Pakistan will not oppose the listing of Masood Azhar as a designated terrorist. So all these factors might have led to China's turnaround with respect to designation of Masood Azhar as a global terrorist. So now, after designation of Masood Azhar as a global terrorist, what is next for Masood Azhar as well as Pakistan? Now, this decision of the United Nations Security Council puts immense pressure on Pakistan to take stern action not only against the JEM chief Masood Azhar but also against other terrorists who are there in Pakistan. This also means that Pakistani establishment has to ensure that Masood Azhar will not travel outside Pakistan and his organization is not able to do any financial transaction based on Pakistani soil. Further, this will also be keenly observed by the Financial Action Task Force because the FATF will soon decide in June whether they will blacklist Pakistan or not. So all these factors becomes important, especially with respect to Pakistan after the fact that UNSC has designated Masood Azhar as a global terrorist. So it puts additional pressure even on Pakistan. Now after our discussion, let's go through this particular practice question. It says, What reasons can be attributed to China's change of stance on listing of Masood Azhar as a global terrorist? Will this decision lead to a better understanding and cooperation between India and China? Give reasons for your answer. So I hope after this particular discussion you will be able to answer this particular question. Now in this discussion we also mentioned about the 1267 committee. So let's understand the basics about 1267 committee, as prelims based questions on this particular committee can be expected in your 2019 examination. It says that the Security Council Committee established pursuant to Resolution 1267 in 1999 concerning Al-Qaeda and the Taliban and associated individuals and entities. Now this committee was established on 15th October 1999 under the Resolution 1267, which imposed sanctions on Taliban controlled Afghanistan for its support on Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. The sanctions regime has been modified and strengthened by subsequent resolutions, including Resolution 1333 in 2000, 1390 in 2002, 1455 in 2003, 1526 in 2004, 1617 in 2005 and 1735 in 2006. Another important aspect to be noted is that as of January 2002, these sanctions no longer exclusively target territory in Afghanistan but now apply to individuals, groups, undertakings and entities designated on the consolidated list where they may be located. Now the 1267 committee comprises of 15 members of the Security Council and makes its decision by consensus. Important facts to be noted is that the current chair of the committee for the period ending 31 December 2019 is His Excellency Mr. Dian Jani of Indonesia, and the two vice chairs for 2019 are the Russian Federation and Peru. Further, this committee also prepares annual reports of its activities. These can be said to be the mandates of the committee: to oversee the implementation of sanctions measures, to designate individuals and entities who meet the listing criteria set out in the relevant resolutions, to consider and decide upon notifications and requests for exemptions from the sanctions measures, to consider and decide upon requests to remove a name from ISIL and Al-Qaeda sanctions list, to conduct periodic and specialized reviews of the entries on ISIL and Al-Qaeda sanctions list, to examine the reports presented by the monitoring team, to report annually to the Security Council on implementation of the sanction measures, as well as to conduct outreach activities. So these can be said to be the mandate of the 1267 committee. Now earlier we studied that the UNSC imposed sanctions on Masood Azhar with respect to assets freeze, travel ban and arms embargo. Now with respect to asset freeze, it says that all states are required to freeze without delay the funds and other financial assets or economic resources of designated individuals and entities. With respect to travel ban, it says that all states are required to prevent the entry into or transit through their territories by designated individuals. With respect to arms embargo, it says that all states are required to prevent the direct or indirect supply, sale and transfer from territories or by their nationals outside their territories, or using flag vessels or aircraft of arms and related material of all types, spare parts, technical advice, assistance or training related to military activities to designated individuals and entities. So designation of Masood Azhar as global terrorist puts an asset freeze on his organization as well, a travel ban as well as arms embargo. Hence, on this note, this news becomes extremely important to understand both from prelims as well as from a mains point of view. Now, from your mains perspective, you can try to answer this practice question. With this, let's move on to our next news discussion. The next news appears on page number 7. It says, Indo-French naval exercise begins. The first part of Indo-French joint naval exercise Varuna 19.1 began off the Goa coast on Wednesday, and this will continue till 10th of May. So the first part of Indo-French joint naval exercise Varuna, that is 19.1, has begun in Goa and will continue from 1st May till 10th May 2019. The second part of Varuna 19.2 is scheduled to be held at the end of May in Djibouti. Now from a prelims point of view, this news forms a part of current events of national and international importance. as question based on Indo-French naval exercise can be expected in your upcoming 2019 prelims examination. Now this particular news has also been highlighted in the Press Information Bureau. It says that Indian and French navies conduct Varuna 19.1 bilateral exercise off Goa coast from 1st to 10th of May 2019. So it says that this upcoming 17th edition includes participation of French Navy's aircraft carrier FNS Charles de Gaulle and two destroyers FNS Forbin and FNS Provence. It also includes frigate FNS La Touche-Trevel, the tanker FNS Marne and a nuclear submarine. Whereas the Indian side includes the aircraft carrier INS Vikram Aditya, destroyer INS Mumbai, the Teg class frigate INS Tarkash, the Shishumar class submarine, and the Deepak class fleet tanker INS Deepak will also be participating in this joint naval exercise. Now, as already mentioned, that this particular exercise shall be conducted in two phases. The first phase will be conducted in Goa and the second phase will be conducted in Djibouti. This harbour phase at Goa will include cross visits, professional interactions and discussions as well as sports event. Whereas the sea phase will comprise various exercises across the spectrum of maritime operations. Now this bilateral naval exercise initiated in 1983 and has been named as Varuna in 2001. And Varuna forms a vital part of Indo-French strategic partnership. Now this exercise, that is Varuna, has grown in scope and complexity over the years, and this exercise exemplifies strong relations between India and France. And this growing relation between India and France is also in line with the joint strategic vision of India-French cooperation in the Indian Ocean region. And this was signed by Indian Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi and the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, on the French President's India's visit in March 2018. The Varuna exercise aims at developing interoperability as well as to improve the mutual cooperation between two navies, and also by learning from each other's best practices to conduct joint operations. So this exercise underscores the shared interest and commitment of both India and France in promoting maritime security in the Indian Ocean region. So this particular news with respect to Indo-French naval exercise becomes extremely important from your upcoming prelims examination. With this, let's move on to our next news discussion. The next news appears on page number 5. It says, Chandrayaan 2 gets new launch window in July 2019. Now Chandrayaan 2, after much delay, is now scheduled to be launched any time between 5th to 16th July 2019. Further, moon landing of Chandrayaan 2 will take place around 6 September 2019 around the lunar south pole. Now this lunar south pole is believed to contain ice as well as other minerals, and even NASA plans to send their astronauts on lunar south pole by 2024. Further, China plans to build a scientific research station on the lunar south pole within the next 10 years. Now Chandrayaan 2 also will consist of two orbiter landers, namely Vikram and Pragyan. And the Chandrayaan 2 will be launched on board a GSLV Mark III rocket. This GSLV Mark III is a three-staged heavy lift launch vehicle that has been designed to carry 4-ton class satellites to geosynchronous transfer orbit. Now this topic of Chandrayaan 2 in your prelims examination gets covered under general science, whereas in your mains it gets covered under GS paper 3. Now as per the website of NASA, it says that a lunar south pole is one of the most compelling places in the entire solar system, and this particular region of the moon is very important to the lunar scientists. It says that the towering massifs of South Pole Aitken Basin, and these massifs contain impact melt which will allow the scientists to find out the age of this huge basin. It further says that the permanently shadowed craters of lunar South Pole may harbor reservoirs of ice and other volatile compounds that could serve as a tremendously valuable resource for future explorers. Important point to be noted is that these volatile deposits could contain priceless record of water composition dating back to the beginning of the solar system, and this might give an idea about the entire lunar structure to the scientists and explorers. And this will also provide a data set for the astrobiological investigations. Another important aspect highlighted in this fact is that a few mountain peaks near the pole, that is near the South Pole, just west and east of the Shackleton crater, are illuminated for extended periods of time, and this could provide near constant solar power for a permanent lunar outpost sometimes in the near future. So, considering all these important aspects, the lunar south pole of the moon becomes an extremely important place for future scientific explorations about the moon. Now, this topic of Chandrayaan 2 has been covered extensively in detail in the DNS dated 26 March 2019. So, what we can do is to revise certain basic facts about Chandrayaan 2 from this video dated 26 March of 2019. It says that India's lunar mission Chandrayaan 2, which is scheduled to launch next month, will carry NASA's laser instruments, as this will help scientists to make precise measurements of the distance to the moon. So this NASA's laser instrument will help the scientists to make a precise measurement of the distance to moon. It also mentions about Israeli lander Beresheet, which will also carry NASA-owned laser retroreflector arrays. So this information that Chandrayaan 2 will carry NASA's laser instrument to help scientists to make precise measurements of the distance to the moon becomes a part of general science in your prelims examination. So from a prelims point of view, you must remember that Chandrayaan 2 will also carry NASA's laser instruments. And you must also remember about Beresheet, which is an Israeli lander. So on this note, let us learn certain basic facts with respect to Chandrayaan 2 as well as Chandrayaan 1. So it says that Chandrayaan 1 was India's first mission to moon, which launched successfully in October 2008, and this launch took place from Sriharikota. Chandrayaan 1 orbited around the moon at a height of 100 km from the lunar surface for chemical, mineralogical and photogeologic mapping of the moon. So Chandrayaan 1 took close pictures of the moon, including its chemical, mineralogical and photogeologic mapping. It says that Chandrayaan 1 carried 11 scientific instruments built in India, USA, UK, Germany, Sweden and Bulgaria. Now Chandrayaan 2 is an advanced version of the previous Chandrayaan 1 mission. And this Chandrayaan 2 is configured as a two-module system comprising of an orbiter craft module and second a lander craft module. So Chandrayaan 2 mission is configured as a two-module system comprising of an orbiter craft module and a lander craft module, and this also carries a rover developed by Indian Space and Research Organization. Now we have already seen that Chandrayaan 2 will comprise of an orbiter craft module, a lander craft module and also a rover developed by ISRO. So it mentions that Chandrayaan 2, after reaching the 100 km lunar orbit, the lander housing the rover will separate from the orbiter. And after the controlled descent, the lander will soft land on the lunar surface at a specified site and deploy a rover. So Chandrayaan 2 will actually touch the lunar surface. It further says that the mission will carry a 6-wheeled rover which will maneuver around the landing site in semi-autonomous mode, as it will be decided by the ground commands from Earth. The instruments on the rover will observe the lunar surface and also send back data which will be useful for the analysis of the lunar soil. So this mission will also collect lunar soil for analysis. It says that the Chandrayaan 2 will orbit around the moon and perform objectives of remote sensing the moon, whereas the payloads will collect scientific information on lunar topography, mineralogy, elemental abundance, lunar exosphere, as well as signatures of hydroxyl and water ice. That is, the Chandrayaan 2 mission will also try to find traces of water, if any, on lunar surface. So these are some of the important information with respect to Chandrayaan 2, which you must remember from your prelims as well as mains point of view, as questions can be asked in your prelims examination as well as in your mains examination. The next news about independent candidate appears on page number 9 in the section of poll call. It says that an independent candidate is one who contests polls without being afflicted to any political party. Now, these independents often support policies that are different from major political parties. It further says that more and more independents have been contesting Lok Sabha elections since the first general election of 1951 and 52, but the number of winners have been decreasing. Not only that, even the vote percentage polled for the independent candidates have been decreasing. And it is difficult for these independent candidates to win elections also because of the fact that their ability to raise money from public is quite limited as compared to a political party. The Law Commission in its 255th report suggested a major change as it suggested that independent candidates be barred from contesting elections as they are either not serious or contest elections just to confuse the voters. So these are some of the issues with respect to independent candidate standing in an election. In this analysis, let us also learn certain other facts with respect to independent candidates. Now, this topic in your prelims examination forms a part of polity and governance. Now, the eligibility criteria for independent candidates is same as that for any other candidate contesting Lok Sabha election, which is 25 years of age, and he or she shall be a citizen of India. Another important aspect with respect to independent candidate is that for an independent candidate to file nomination, 10 voters from the same constituency must sign the nomination paper as proposer for the independent candidate. Whereas for any other candidate belonging to a political party, the number of proposer is just one. Now, this provision has been provided in Section 33 of Representation of People Act of 1951, as it says that for a candidate belonging to a political party, nomination paper must be completed in the prescribed form and signed by the candidate and by an elector of the constituency as proposer. Whereas for a candidate not set up by a recognized political party shall not be deemed to be duly nominated for election from a constituency unless the nomination paper is subscribed by 10 proposers being electors of the constituency. So this stringent provision has also been provided in the Representation of People Act with respect to independent candidates. Now, with respect to allotment of symbols to independent candidates, the candidate contesting as an independent are allowed to choose 3 free symbols listed by the Election Commission. And after this, the independent candidates have to name these symbols in the order of preference and also mention the same in the nomination paper filed to the returning officer. The returning officer is the final authority with respect to allocation of symbol to these independent candidates. Now, these independent candidates also find a mentions in the 10th schedule with respect to anti-defection law. The 10th schedule says that if a member has been elected as independent, then he or she would be disqualified if they join a political party after their elections. So, if an independent candidate contests the election and wins the election, then after winning, they cannot join the political party. The provision of the 10th schedule says that an elected member of a house who has been elected as such otherwise than as a candidate set up by any political party shall be disqualified for being a member of the house if he joins any political party after such elections. So, independent candidates also find their mention in the 10th schedule to the Indian Constitution. So, these can be said to be some of the important aspects with respect to independent candidates which you can remember from your prelims perspective. With this, let's move on to our next news discussion. The next news appears in the editorial section on page number 8. It says, "The cost of resistance. India must brace for economic shocks from uncontrolled antimicrobial resistance." Now, this editorial mentions how uncontrolled antimicrobial resistance can give rise to economic shocks and affect India or impact India. This article refers to a report from Intra-Agency Coordination Group on Antimicrobial Resistance, that is IACG, and the report is titled "No Time to Wait, Securing the Future from Drug-Resistant Infections." Now, this topic of drug resistance gets covered under general science in your prelims examination, and your mains it gets covered under GS paper 3 under science and technology. Antimicrobial resistance occurs when disease causing microorganisms such as fungi, bacteria and parasites becomes ineffective to medication. So such microorganisms which acquire resistance against microbial drugs are referred as superbugs. Now, this report finds out that in about 3 decades from now, uncontrolled antimicrobial resistance will cause global economic shocks on the scale of 2008-9 financial crisis. And it has been estimated that nearly 10 million people are estimated to die annually from resistant infections by the year 2050. Further, due to antimicrobial resistance, healthcare cost is going to rise, as well as the cost of food production will also increase. And this increase in healthcare cost as well as food production cost will lead to widening of income inequality, as more part of a family income will be spent on healthcare cost as well as with respect to buying nutritious food. The report further says that in a worst case scenario, the world will lose 3.8% of its annual GDP by the year 2050, whereas 24 million people will be pushed into extreme poverty by the year 2030. So these are some of the economic aspects of rising antimicrobial resistance in the whole world. The report further highlights another important aspect. It says that for high and mid income nations, the price of prevention with respect to antimicrobial infection would be extremely affordable with respect to $2 per head a year. Whereas for poorer countries, the price with respect to healthcare cost is higher but still modest compared to cost of an antibiotic apocalypse. So somewhere the report also highlights a difference with respect to affordability in terms of healthcare cost, especially in antimicrobial resistance cases. Now, as per this report, there are certain key messages in this report titled No Time to Wait, Securing the Future from Drug Resistant Infections. It says, because the drivers of antimicrobial resistance lie in humans, animals, plants, food, and the environment, a sustained One Health response is essential to engage and unite all stakeholders around a shared vision and goals. Further, it says that there is no time to wait. Unless the world acts urgently, antimicrobial resistance will have disastrous impact within a generation. And antimicrobial resistance is a global crisis that threatens a century of progress in health and achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. So this particular report also highlights that progress achieved through Sustainable Development Goals may be threatened because of rising cases of antimicrobial resistance. So the report provides for a summary of recommendations. It says, first, to accelerate progress in countries; second, to innovate to secure the future; collaborate among different stakeholders for more effective action; invest for a sustainable response, as well as to strengthen accountability and global governance. The sustainable goals highlighted in this report are with respect to no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, clean water and sanitation, industry innovation and infrastructure, reduce inequalities, responsible consumption and production, as well as partnership for goals. Now, with respect to India, India first published almost 9 years ago the broad contours of a plan to fight antimicrobial resistance. However, there have been certain difficulty in implementing the programs, as India is faced with twin challenges of overuse of antibiotics as well as underuse of antibiotics. Now, the overuse of antibiotics is because of poorly regulated pharmaceutical industry, as it means that antibiotics are freely available to those who can afford such pharmaceuticals or who can afford such medicines. Whereas underuse is seen when many Indians still die of diseases like sepsis and pneumonia, because these people do not get the right drug at the right time. So, policy against antimicrobial resistance must be focused on two aspects, that is, preventive aspects as well as curative aspects. It says that policy against antimicrobial resistance focuses on the idea that it needs to be tackled from many angles at multiple levels and across different sectors. Hence, we can classify them into two broad categories, that is, preventive action and curative action. With respect to preventive action, it says we need to recognize that these are the problems that transcend national borders or have a global political and economic impact. Hence, there is a need for a global effort to counter cases of antimicrobial resistance. Further, at national level, we need to create and follow a national master plan regarding antimicrobial resistance. Then, we need to improve spending on healthcare along with strengthening an ethical regime in medical practices. So, basically, we need to provide more stringent regulatory mechanisms with respect to selling of pharmaceuticals. Further, we also need to focus on immunization rates and eliminate drinking water contamination. And one way is to improve hygiene, sanitation, as well as vaccinations across different parts of the countries. And with respect to this awareness, advocacy, as well as behavioral change can help in combating antimicrobial resistance. Whereas with respect to curative type of actions, it mentions that we need to focus on strengthening supply system of medicines along with proper regulatory measures. Further, the private pharmaceutical industries must ensure that they distribute drugs in a responsible manner, and only authorized practitioners must be allowed to prescribe these important medicines. Further, proper availability and restrictive sale of antimicrobial resistant drugs must be focused on by different governments of the world so as to ensure their proper use. Thus, this particular editorial with respect to this particular report becomes extremely important both from our prelims as well as from our mains perspective. With this, let's move on to our next news discussion. The next article appears on page number 9. It says, Beyond Khalistan. By focusing only on this issue, New Delhi risks alienating the Sikh diaspora of Canada. The backdrop to this particular article is that India-Canada ties of late has deteriorated in recent years because the Indian government considers that the current government of Justin Trudeau in Canada is soft on individuals and organizations which supports demand for creating Khalistan. Now this can be found in recent instances where the Canadian Defence Minister Harjit Singh Sajjan has been accused of having links with Sikh separatists. And during his 2017 visit to India, the Chief Minister of Punjab, Captain Amrinder Singh, refused to meet the Canadian Defence Minister. Similarly, during Mr. Trudeau's visit to India in 2018, he was also given a low-key welcome by the Government of India because of his government's unwillingness to support Indian views on Canadian Khalistani supporters. So, in the backdrop of this deteriorating India-Canada ties, this article highlights that India and Canada should avoid making their relationship being negatively affected by a single issue, as India risks alienating the complete Sikh diaspora in Canada on account of views of few individuals. Therefore, India should instead reach out to the Sikh diaspora in Canada as well as in United States and UK to commemorate Guru Nanak's 550th birth anniversary. Now this topic in your prelims examination gets covered under current events of international importance, and your mains it gets covered under GS paper 2, specifically under international relations. So it was in this backdrop that during the 2018 visit of Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, a joint statement was signed between the Government of India and Canada. Now as per the joint statement, Canada has agreed and asserted that it will respect the sovereignty, unity and territorial integrity of India. This in a way signals or indirectly ensures that Canada will not sympathize with separatist Khalistani movement. Further, both these countries agreed for an agreement on bilateral framework for cooperation on countering terrorism and violent extremism, referred as FCCTVE, whereby under this agreement, both countries, that is India and Canada, intend to work together to neutralize the threat emanating from terrorist organizations such as Babbar Khalsa International, International Sikh Youth Federation, as well as in addition to ISIS, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Toiba, among other terrorist organizations. So, India and Canada have asserted for making accountable state sponsors of terrorism, including cross-border terrorism. Both these countries have further emphasized that no country should allow its territory to be used for terrorist and violent extremist activities. And this particular aspect is seen as indirect reference to Pakistan and its continued sponsor of terrorism in Afghanistan and India. So the author in this article have highlighted that India and Canada should avoid making their relationship being negatively affected or impacted by a single issue, as India risks alienating complete Sikh diaspora in Canada as well as in US and UK. And rather, India should reach out to the Sikh diaspora in Canada, US and UK to commemorate Guru Nanak's 550th birth anniversary. Now, after our discussion, these forms your practice question for the day. What you can do is to take a pause of 5 seconds. The first question says, Resolution 1267 of United Nations Security Council pertains to options are international aviation, pharmaceutical industry, child labor, and imposing sanctions on terrorist organizations. In this, the correct answer is D, that is, imposing sanctions on terrorist organization. Moving on to the second practice question, it says Varuna is a joint naval exercise between which of the following countries? Options are India Australia, India France, India USA, and India UK. In this, the correct answer is India and France. Now, these are your practice questions number 3 and practice question number 4. What you can do is to take a pause of 5 seconds. Question number 3 says, consider the following statements. First, Aitken Basin and Shackleton crater can be found on the lunar south pole. Yes, the statement is correct. Second, Chandrayaan 2 will only observe lunar atmosphere without landing on the moon. No, the statement is incorrect as Chandrayaan 2 will land on the moon. So in this, the correct answer is A, that is 1 only. The next question says, consider the following statements about an independent candidate contesting Lok Sabha elections. First, symbols are not allotted to such candidates. No, this statement is incorrect as symbols are allotted to independent candidates by the returning officer. Second, 10th schedule of the Indian Constitution is silent on independent candidates. No, 10th schedule of the Indian Constitution says that after winning an election as an independent candidate, they cannot join a political party. So in this, the second statement also becomes incorrect. So in this, the correct answer is D, that is neither 1 nor 2. With this, we come to an end to discussion of today's newspaper. Let's move on to the question for the day.